Lerner, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about film cameras. Before I get into that, if you guys would take a moment and please subscribe to my channel, you can keep up to date with everything that I'm posting. Whenever there's a new video, you will know, you'll be notified, which would be really cool. All right, so let's get into it. I have a collection of film cameras. Yes, I've been shooting film for years and years and years, and I still love shooting film to this day. Now, would I recommend everybody jump out and shoot film? I don't know. It's kind of an expensive, time-consuming, awkward proposition. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's a little bit more involved than just putting a card in your camera, shooting, taking the card, and dumping the pictures into your computer. For example, this here is a Nikon F100. This is a camera that was, I think, came out in 1999. This is a film camera that resembles closely to, like, let's say a Nikon D700, and probably is about the equivalent. Let's say if the F5 was the flagship camera, this would have been this F100 would have been the prosumer or the advanced amateur camera, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. Anyway. Plenty of pros use these cameras. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not necessarily not professional. It just might not be as fast as the F5 for shooting sports. I've got the grip on here. It's a little bit faster with the grip. And as you can see, I've got one of the current AFS nano-coated 85mm lenses on here because this camera will shoot just about any lens that Nikon has ever made. And it autofocuses beautifully with the current glass. Now, one of the things to think about is that when you shoot film, you've got the cost of the film, okay? So you're going to be spending anywhere between $4 to $8 for a roll of film. Okay, that's fine. Then you've got to have the film processed, okay? So the film has to get sent out or dropped off somewhere, and that's going to run you like $8 or $10. And then you've got to get it scanned, unless if you don't have a good film scanner or you're not adept at scanning film, because scanning film is different than scanning like an image, for example, then you have to have it scanned. So then you're talking about probably another $20 total to have the film processed and scanned. So between the film processing and scanning, you're talking $25 potentially for 36 frames. And you have to hope that those 36 frames are good, or at least there's a few keepers in there to make it worth your while. So it is kind of an expensive proposition. And it is time consuming. The other thing to think about is, like, let's say you're shooting with Polaroid, okay? And here we have the Polaroid 180. This was the professional series land camera. That's because it has a really good lens, really good glass on here. It's fully manually controlled. Okay, so you've got to buy the pack film. The pack film's pretty cheap. It's probably about $8 or so for a packet of 10. But then you have to, shoot the film. You have to get your exposures right. There's no metering in here, and then you have to scan those images in and edit them, and it's a lot more involved. So the thing is that you have to decide, is film for me? So I wouldn't suggest any of you guys just run out there and buy a film camera until you think about all that's involved. Are you willing to take the time? For example, let's say you buy, like a quirky little manual focus film camera like this guy over here. Okay, this has no controls on it. It does have a little light meter in here. It's like basically 2 red dots, and if the top dot is blinking, it's overexposed. If the bottom dot is blinking, it's underexposed. Not what I would call accurate, but again, it's fully manual, so you have to basically take your chances. You're rolling the dice. You have to really know your exposures, or you have to travel with a light meter. So there's a lot more steps involved in there. So again, before you guys just run out and think, hey man, it would be so cool if I shoot film, think about start to finish. Are you up for the challenge? And if you are, that's great. I love shooting film. I started with shooting film, and I continue to shoot film to this day. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to say that film is better, that it's cooler. I love the way film looks. I think that there's something about the way a negative is saturated with the depth of color and just a thickness that is hard to approximate, but certainly not impossible to approximate in digital. Let's start with something simple here. This camera right here, at first glance, you would think, oh yeah, it's a new digital camera, Nikon, whatever. No, this is a 1999 Nikon F100, and this one actually has the battery grip on here. This is a film camera, And interestingly, this camera was one of the last of the series of, I guess, prosumer film cameras. I guess if you wanted to make an equivalent in the digital camera world, this is probably like the D700 equivalent of its day. It has matrix metering, it's got 5 focus points, it's pretty quick, and the cool thing is that it takes any current lens as well as older lenses. So what that means is that I can take my recent AFS Nikon 85mm, nano-coated lens, and it will autofocus and it'll perform just as well on here as it will with my D3S. It runs on just standard AA batteries, and the thing is it's got the LED up here, the LCD display, very much like a digital camera. It kind of handles the same way. I mean, obviously they built their current lineup of cameras on this body. It's got a massively beautifully bright viewfinder, and you can just hear it just has a nice shutter. And the thing is that the tendency to look at the back of the camera is right there, but obviously if you look inside there, you'll see that it is a film transport camera. So the cool thing again about this camera is that I think this was about $1,500 when it came out, and now you can find them on eBay for as little as, I think, like $150. And the great thing about it is that you don't need rechargeable batteries or any kind of chargers, and it will use virtually any lens from your older AFD lenses to your current AFS lenses. So that's a really cool thing. So when I'm shooting, and I'm shooting with my Nikon digital, I can also shoot this and just bring one set of lenses. Very, very cool. That's 35mm. Now, a lot of you guys know that I shoot medium format, but I also shoot medium format film. One of the first medium format film cameras I started with is this little Rolleiflex. This is an older camera made in Germany, and it is a TLR, twin lens reflex. So what that means is that we have one lens here where light passes through and one lens here for the shutter. It's kind of a funky camera to use. I have both the pentaprism and the pop-up viewfinder, and you kind of look through here and you see kind of like a reversed image. It's an awkward camera. I mean, you focus with your left hand. The shutter is like all the way down here. You have to kind of cock it over here and then swing this thing back. But once you actually nail using this thing, it's got a leaf shutter, so it's really super quiet. It's pretty cool. It shoots up to a 500th of a second, f3.5, 75mm. So I wouldn't say it's like the perfect portrait lens, I wouldn't say it's the perfect portrait camera, but you can shoot some pretty nice portraits. I think the focusing distance is probably only about 3 feet. So, speaking of medium format film cameras, there is the Hasselblad 500 series, which the 500 series is kind of like the ubiquitous medium format film camera. A lot of folks now are finding these to be great student cameras. There's a lot of folks that are kind of getting into film maybe for the first time, and the cool thing about these cameras is that they're built incredibly well. The optics are fantastic. It's a completely modular system, which is really cool, which I'll get to in a minute. And they can be had relatively inexpensively, considering what they originally cost. Like the Nikon that was originally $1,500 and now it's $150. The same is true for these. These were thousands of dollars when they first came out, and now for well under $1,000 you could have a 500 series body, back, finder, and lens. And when I say that, that means that this is the body, this is the camera body here, this is the finder, okay, the viewfinder I should say, this is the back where the film goes, and this is the lens. And this entire system can be disassembled, and a lot of these different bits are interchangeable. One of the really cool things about the 500 series, particularly when it was let's say the go-to professional camera for advertising and fashion, is that these backs, you could have as many of these backs as you want, these film backs. This back comes right off of here, okay? The film cassette gets loaded into this back. So what that meant is that if you were on a professional shoot, you would have your assistant load a whole bunch of backs or preload backs, so that the minute you finished those 12 shots, they would hand you another back, you'd put the back on, and you would just resume shooting. And then they would take that back, they would take the film out, they would load another roll of film in it, and so on and so forth. So therefore you could have somewhat seamless type of shooting. Whereas if you were shooting with the Rolleiflex, for that matter, and I'll get to that in a second, This puppy is a little bit more complicated. You've got to take it off of the tripod, you've got to take the bottom apart over here, and you got to kind of wrangle the whole camera in order to change the film. It's not that big a deal once you do it a few times, but it definitely is not as easy and as modular as just simply popping the back of this thing off like that, which is really cool. You've got the dark slide here, which protects light from getting onto the film. So once you put the film back on there, then you pull the dark slide out, and then when you take your images, it will expose the film onto the transport accordingly. The other cool thing is that there is the Polaroid Back for the Hasselblad. The neat thing about this is that you can do test proofs with Polaroid film, and you can still get this Fuji film, this Fuji FP100C. It's a good film. It's not as great as the old Polaroid film, but back in the day, before a photographer went, they set up their lights, they got everything all going, and then they would do some test shots onto Polaroids to see how the light was falling, to see what their exposure was like, and then they would shoot to film. I love shooting Polaroids. I think that they look super cool. I don't mind shooting Fujiroids. I think that they look really cool as well. And again, the nice thing about this is that I can take this back off here, I can take this back right here, and I can just put this puppy on the back of the camera. One second. There we go. And boom! Now I can shoot Polaroids. I mean, granted, this is like a pretty awkward kind of a setup on the camera here, but still, it's a modular system. This thing is made to take Polaroids, and that's really cool. So that is a few examples of some medium format goodness. Okay, now let us get into Polaroid. Speaking of which, we've got this Polaroid camera here. This is the Polaroid Land Camera 180. What differentiated the 180 from a lot of the other Land Camera series, they all shot the 100 pack film, which you can see back here is this size here, okay? And this is 100 pack film, which you can still get today if you can't get your hands on any expired or vintage Polaroid film. The 180 actually had like a really decent lens, okay? This lens I think has 4 elements and super sharp, fully manual, so you got manual exposure both for your shutter speed and for your aperture. You can shoot up to 1/500th of a second. It's got PC sync ports over here, and I use this camera with strobes and pocket wizards and the whole deal. It's a really cool camera. I mean, when you get it right, the images really look cool. And again, you can get this Fuji Polaroid or Fujiroid, whatever you want to call this stuff. A lot of the retailers have this stuff. You can get it for like $7, $8 a pack for 10 exposures, which is not bad. Now, speaking of the Fujiroid film, this stuff is very resilient, so it's not very forgiving. So what that means is that if you don't have a lot of light, this is not going to be your friend. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's certainly fun to play around with. Speaking of Polaroids, I love Polaroids, and here's another cool Polaroid camera. This is the SLR 680. This is a single lens reflex camera, and you can no longer get the Polaroid film, but you can get the Impossible Project film, which is really expensive and really quirky. When you do get good results, it's a lot of fun, and then there's every other time as well. The cool thing about this kind of camera is that, okay, you can see in here, this is actually just an empty pack, but the cool thing about this pack here is that the battery is built into the pack. So the cool thing about this camera is that the actual camera battery is built into the into the pack. So what that means is that the camera has no battery in it. It's an electronic camera, but it's powered by the film pack, which is really kind of cool. So you don't have to buy batteries, you don't have to worry about batteries corroding in it. And right down here in this little area, that's where the developer is. So when this thing gets squeezed through the rollers, when the battery pushes it out, that's when all the magic happens, and then obviously you let it sit there and expose and do its thing. This SLR 680 just happens to have sonar for focusing, which means that if you're using this to focus, you're going to get spot on focus, and it's got a flash, which is really cool, and you can adjust the flash. It's got a flash zoom. It's a pretty sophisticated camera considering, from where it started. I think the first camera of its type was the SX70. I'll just grab that. This is a pretty cool camera too. Manual focus, you can get flash bars for it. It's an SLR just like that one. But the difference is that the film for the SLR 680 is a little bit easier to come by. But you can still get film for this. I think Impossible Project makes it as well. So that's just a few different examples. Very quickly, you've got your 35mm film cameras, you've got medium format film cameras, and you've got your Polaroid film cameras. And that's kind of like a selection of different types of cameras in those worlds that I tend to shoot with, because I find that I have a lot of fun with those. I love the fact that I can use this Nikon and interchange, lenses, and I can use all of my strobes and pocket wizards, and I can pretty much use it like I use my Nikon D3S, my professional Nikon. The Hasselblad and the Rolleiflex, they're much quirkier, but again, you can sync flashes up to 1/500th of a second with either of those cameras, and they have tack sharp optics, and you've got that really big negative, which is really fantastic. The Polaroids are really great. I think you get a lot more consistent results with the Polaroid 180 and or the Polaroid Back that you're going to use on the Hasselblad, but you can have a lot of fun and really creatively fun results with the Impossible Project film, which I'm not affiliated with, but I've tried it a bunch and it can be fun. I mean, it's pretty pricey for just a handful of exposures, but it can be really fun and really creative. So that was just kind of like an introduction to the film cameras that I use and that I love using. I'm not suggesting that these are the film cameras that you guys should run out and buy just because I have them, but this is just a few examples of some of the cameras that I've collected over the years and that I tend to continue to use to this day. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching my video. If you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, just click the subscribe button that's located just beneath the video right here. Once you've done that, click on Manage Subscriptions and then check off whether you want to be emailed when I upload a new video or if you want those videos to show up in your newsfeed.